Hey class, today I'm going to teach you guys different color pencil techniques. There are three different techniques that I want you to know. The first one is tip versus side, the second is pressure variation, and the third one is layering. Tip versus side, you want to make sure your color pencil is sharp. So if you're looking at this color pencil, you see that it has a nice tip and it also has a side that I can use for bigger areas. The first I'm going to show you is the side technique. So I'm going to use the side of my pencil by holding it sideways to the paper, and then I'm going to shade in a bigger area with it. When you're doing that, you want to make sure that you go back and forth in the area so you can make sure that none of the white of the paper is showing through any longer. And you want to take your time. If you're rushing through it, you might miss some spots, and it also has a tendency to create some streaks on it. Now, I'm going to use the tip of the pencil, which I can use to draw smaller details, smaller areas, or I can also add some details. For example, if I want to draw some grass, I can use the tip of the pencil and I can draw little lines, which will then create the feel of a texture. Now, you can also see the difference in the way I'm holding my pencil. For the side technique, I hold it on the back of the pencil and go back and forth. While when I'm using the tip of my pencil, I'm using it further on the front, like this. Now, the second technique I want to show you is called pressure variation. Pressure variation is also using the side of the pencil, and it is going to create a sense of shading. So if I use a lot of pressure, my color pencil will be much darker, while if I use less pressure, it's going to be a lot lighter. So if I want something that is shaded a little bit lighter, I can just use a little bit of pressure. And then if I want to become darker, I will just increase the amount of pressure that I'm using. Now I can go from the top to the bottom using less pressure. And as I'm moving further down on my page, I'm going to use more pressure and increase the amount of pressure as I go down further. And you can see the difference between a lot of pressure and little pressure. So it is nice and soft on the top, and then it will get a little bit more dark as I go to the bottom. This is something you can use to create the feeling of roundness on an object. For example, I drew a little circle here with my pencil, and I can shade it in with a light amount of pressure first. And then if I want to look more rounded off, I will just add some more pressure around the outside edges, which will create a sense of shadows around the object. So now I'm going to start adding some more darker values to it. And I can also outline my object with it. And you want to build up your darker values a little bit slow, just like I did with my sides technique. I took my time to fill in all the areas, and that's the same for when I'm creating some shading on this object here. If you go too fast from one area to the next, it will look messy and unfinished. Now when you have something rounded off like this, you want to kind of pick one side that is darker and one side that is lighter, because if you imagine that there's some light coming from this direction, then it would be darker on this side because it would look like shadows. And I can even put a cast shadow, which would be the shadow on the surface. Let's say it's sitting on a table, then the object will cast a shadow on there, which is also darker towards the object, and then fades away. Alright, so this is one way you can create some rounded offness on an object. I'm going to draw another shape over here with a different technique, and I already drew a heart shape on here. Now I'm going to use something called layering. Layering is a little bit similar to pressure variation, where you are creating some shading, but you're also going to mix up colors. So I'm also going to take a yellow color pencil, and you want to pick colors which are similar. So I have yellow, orange, and red. Yellow being my lightest color, so I'm going to use that first. So now I can shade in my object, and I'm using the side technique to do the shading. So I'm holding my pencil sideways to the paper, and I can also hold it further back on the pencil. And I'm shading in the whole object, taking my time with it. And now, after I put my first color on here, I'm ready to add my next color. My next darkest color between the three colors is orange. So now I can use my orange color, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm outlining my shape with my orange. The reason why I'm outlining my object is because I want to make sure that I don't shade past my shape. So when I'm outlining it, that would prevent me from going past the lines that I drew initially. But I don't want to have that outline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go from the outside inwards, but I'm still following along the shape of the heart. So now I'm going to keep adding more of my orange. And I'm using a lot of pressure right now, and as I'm going further inside of my heart, I will use less pressure. So now I'm actually combining the different techniques. I'm using tip versus side, and I'm also using pressure variation. Now just to show you the difference between using layering and not using layering, I'm going to leave the right side of my heart in the yellow color, and I'm going to do more shading on just my left side of this heart. So now I'm going to switch to my third color, which is my darkest color, and that's the red. And again, I'm starting on the outside of it, and I don't want to go too far in. I don't want to cover up the entire yellow and orange. I just want to add a little bit of extra darkness to it with my darker color. And I also want to get rid of the outline that I drew on here. So I'm kind of blending the colors together by using my red color. And then I'm just going to add a little bit on the inside here, and that's pretty good. I'm going to show you a close-up of the way the different shapes turn out. So again, here you can see my tip versus side. So I have a nice shaded in area here, and I have some textures on the bottom. And over here I use pressure variation to create some rounded off shapes with it. And over here is my layering. Alright, the reason why we do these kind of color pencil techniques is because if you don't use those kind of techniques, your image will look very flat and very unfinished. So these are more advanced color pencil techniques. You don't just shade in your shapes, but instead you actually want to make it look a little bit more advanced, and that will make your artwork look a lot better.